The night air was heavy with turpentine and linseed oil, the familiar perfume of obsession that clung to the walls of Johnny's cluttered art studio. The floor was littered with crumpled sketches, half-finished canvases, and cigarette ash, each telling fragments of a mind spiraling toward brilliance or madness, no one could tell which. A single hanging bulb swung slightly above his head, humming as it cast restless shadows across his newest painting, a haunting self-portrait split by a jagged streak of red. The brush danced in Johnny's trembling hand as he whispered to himself, "You're not painting what you see, you're painting what you feel." His reflection in the old mirror leaning against the wall seemed to nod in agreement, a silent companion to his late-night rituals. But when he paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, something subtle shifted. His reflection didn't stop moving. At first, he thought it was exhaustion. 3 nights with no sleep, fueled by black coffee and self-loathing, could make anyone see ghosts. But the movement was deliberate. The reflection tilted its head, slower than he had. It blinked. Once. Johnny froze mid-breath, his brush suspended in the air. The ticking of the clock behind him suddenly felt deafening. He took a cautious step closer to the mirror, his boots crunching over shards of old paint tubes. His heart thudded hard enough to drown out thought. "Okay, that's not real," he muttered, forcing a shaky laugh. But his reflection didn't echo it. Instead, its lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, a smile Johnny hadn't made. He dropped his brush. The sound of it hitting the floor snapped the silence like a gunshot. Johnny's pulse raced as he reached for the mirror, his fingertips hovering just above the glass surface. He could almost feel something radiating from it, an invisible hum, low and rhythmic, like the slow breathing of something alive. His reflection's eyes tracked his every move, precise and predatory, until he snatched his hand back. He staggered to the window, flinging it open to let in the cold night air. Streetlights painted fractured gold across the rain-slick pavement below, but even in the breeze, he couldn't shake the heat building behind his eyes. He turned back toward the mirror, now perfectly still, perfectly ordinary. His own tired face stared back. "Get a grip, Depp," he whispered under his breath, rubbing his temples. "You're seeing things. You've been up too long." But something deep down, that old artist's instinct that lived in the marrow, whispered that what he'd seen wasn't a trick of fatigue. It had been real. He grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the counter, slushing amber liquid into a glass with shaking hands. The warmth burned down his throat, steadying him just enough to look again. He moved cautiously to the painting, his eyes flicking between the canvas and the mirror. The self-portrait looked more distorted than he remembered, the face slightly warped, the smile sharper. He blinked. The reflection in the mirror was painting again, slow, deliberate strokes across invisible canvas. "No," Johnny murmured. "No, no, no." He kicked the stool over and stumbled back, his heartbeat thrumming in his ears. The reflection stopped mid-stroke, lifting its head to meet his gaze. For one unbearable second, both stared at each other, 2 halves of a man standing on opposite sides of reason. Then the reflection raised its hand and placed its palm flat against the glass. Johnny, trembling, found himself mirroring the gesture until only a thin layer of cold glass separated flesh from imitation. A faint vibration pulsed through his fingertips. Then, nothing. The reflection lowered its hand and resumed perfect sync, as if mocking his fear. Johnny backed away slowly, grabbed an old sheet from a chair, and threw it over the mirror, covering it completely. He stood there, chest heaving, the silence thick enough to choke on. "It's just in your head," he whispered, repeating it like a prayer. But when he turned off the light and left the studio for the night, the camera would linger on the covered mirror. Under the draped cloth, the faint outline of a hand pressed against the fabric from the inside. The fingers dragged slowly downward, leaving 5 invisible streaks that pulsed faintly under the moonlight, like something waiting, watching, patient enough to try again. The next morning bled into existence through slanted rays of light cutting across Johnny's studio. Dust floated in the air like suspended time, each particle drifting through the heavy silence that lingered from the night before. He hadn't slept. The mirror remained covered, its ghostly shape haunting the corner of the room beneath the wrinkled sheet. Johnny sat slouched in his chair, a cigarette burning down between his fingers, its ash long and forgotten. His mind replayed the image over and over, that smirk, that independent blink, that quiet mockery of his sanity. He'd seen strange things before, sure, hallucinations born of sleepless nights and too much bourbon, but this had weight. It felt aware. As sunlight reached the covered mirror, a soft ripple quivered beneath the fabric, so subtle he could have imagined it. He grabbed his coat and left, slamming the door behind him. He knew there was only one person eccentric enough, brilliant enough, and possibly insane enough to believe his story. Dr. Keanu Reeves. The man had once been the darling of neuroscience, the mind behind theories that blurred the line between perception and existence. But after a scandal involving an experiment that supposedly induced mirrored consciousness in test subjects, Keanu had vanished from academia. Some said he'd gone rogue, others whispered he'd seen something that broke him. Johnny didn't care which was true. He needed answers. The drive to Keanu's secluded home took him past the city's edge, through miles of silent woodland and cracked asphalt roads. When he finally arrived, the house stood like a reflection of its owner. Minimalist, cold, almost sterile. The walls were glass and steel, and the interior glowed faintly with blue light from holographic displays that pulsed like living thoughts. Keanu greeted him with calm detachment, his expression unreadable. He wore a simple black sweater, sleeves rolled to his elbows, as though he'd been expecting company. "Johnny," he said, his voice soft but measured, "you look like you've been awake for a decade." Johnny gave a dry laugh, rubbing his neck. "Feels about right." He hesitated, then added, "I've been painting again. But something's wrong. My reflection, it's not me anymore." Keanu didn't interrupt or smile skeptically like most would. He simply gestured for Johnny to sit. "Tell me everything." Johnny recounted the entire night, from a self-portrait to the moving reflection, down to the moment he covered the mirror. His voice trembled, words breaking as if afraid to exist in the air. When he was done, Keanu leaned back, eyes narrowing in thought. "I warned them this could happen," he murmured more to himself than to Johnny. "We thought reflections were passive, but they aren't. They're reactive." He stood and walked to a console, pulling up holographic data that displayed brain scans and neural activity patterns shaped like twin waves, mirroring each other in perfect sync. "When you look into a mirror," he said, "you trigger neuromimicry. Your brain lights up as if you're looking at another person. But what if that process isn't one way? What if something in that reflection learns from watching you, learns enough to imitate thought, or worse, desire?" Johnny stared blankly, trying to keep up. "You're saying my reflection's alive?" Keanu's eyes flicked up, sharp and deliberate. "I'm saying it's aware." Silence stretched between them, heavy as fog. Keanu turned to face the glass wall beside them, where his own reflection shimmered faintly in the morning light. "You said it smiled, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Johnny nodded, his throat dry. "Then it's already trying to communicate." Keanu's voice lowered, almost reverent. "You need to stop painting for now. The reflection anchors itself through focus. Every time you study it, it studies you back." Johnny leaned forward, voice barely a whisper. "Then what does it want?" Keanu's gaze shifted from his reflection back to Johnny. "To live your life," he said simply. "And if it's strong enough, it will." By the time Johnny returned to his studio, the evening had already begun to fade into a bruised sky. The world outside looked duller somehow, like the color had drained from it. He pushed the door open, and the familiar scent of oil paint, turpentine, and stale whiskey welcomed him like an old ghost. The sheet he had thrown over the mirror still hung in the corner, unmoving, innocent, as if mocking his fear from the night before. He stood there for a long moment, debating whether to uncover it. Keanu's warning echoed in his mind. Asterisk, every time you study it, it studies you back. Asterisk, but curiosity was stronger than reason. It always had been. With trembling fingers, Johnny reached for the edge of the cloth and slowly pulled it down. The mirror's surface looked ordinary, smooth, and still. His own reflection stared back, tired eyes, messy hair, paint on his hands. Nothing unusual. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You're losing it, man." He turned away and began cleaning his brushes, humming softly to cut the silence. Then, from the corner of his eye, something flickered. The reflection hadn't turned with him. It stood frozen, watching his back. Johnny froze mid-motion. Slowly, painfully, he turned toward the glass again. The reflection smiled faintly, then, without warning, lifted a brush and began to paint. Johnny's brush lay still on the table, untouched. The one in the reflection moved fast, furious, strokes of invisible color slashing through empty air. The reflection's eyes darkened as if something alive was burning behind them. Johnny stumbled backward, knocking over a can of solvent that spread across the floor. "Stop it!" he shouted, but the reflection didn't respond. It dropped the brush and mouthed two words that sent a chill down his spine. Asterisk, "Let me in." Asterisk, the soundless whisper seemed to vibrate through the room. The studio lights flickered once, twice, before dimming completely. Only the faint silver glow from the mirror illuminated the space now. The glass began to ripple like water disturbed by wind. From within, shadows swirled and shifted until the reflection no longer looked like Johnny at all. Its eyes were pools of black, its smile stretched too wide, its movements slow and deliberate. Johnny reached for a nearby stool and hurled it at the mirror. The stool hit the surface, but instead of shattering, it sank halfway through before being violently flung back across the room, splintering against the wall. Heart hammering, Johnny staggered to his phone, fumbling to dial Keanu. The line crackled once, then connected. "Don't look into it." Keanu's voice snapped through the static, as if he already knew. "It's not a reflection anymore. It's mapping your neural pattern through the glass. It's trying to replace you." The mirror trembled, humming like an enormous speaker, its surface pulsing with faint, rhythmic light that matched Johnny's heartbeat. He dropped the phone, staring in disbelief as the reflection reached out a translucent hand toward the barrier. The tips of its fingers pressed against the glass, distorting it like liquid. Johnny's instinct screamed at him to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The mirror pulled him in with its silent gravity, every step forward unintentional yet unstoppable. The sound of his own pulse filled the air like thunder. At the last moment, Johnny grabbed a heavy canvas and hurled it over the mirror, breaking the spell. The studio fell still again, silent, suffocating. His phone lay cracked on the floor, Keanu's voice faintly repeating through static, "It's learning from you. Stop feeding it." Johnny backed into the corner, chest heaving, staring at the shrouded mirror. Beneath the cloth, the faint outline of two hands pressed outward, palms flat against the fabric. Slowly, one of them began to drag down the inside of the cover, leaving 5 long indentations that pulsed with light before fading into darkness. Johnny sank to the floor, sweat glistening on his skin, his mind unraveling. Somewhere beneath that cloth, the reflection was still painting. And now, Johnny realized with a trembling whisper, it was painting him. The storm outside had gathered like a living thing, pounding against the windows of Johnny's studio with sheets of relentless rain. Thunder rolled through the night, shaking the glass panes as lightning briefly illuminated the walls, where dozens of Johnny's paintings stared back, distorted faces, twisted bodies, and shadows that now looked far too human. He sat slumped in the middle of the room, eyes fixed on the shrouded mirror. He hadn't dared to uncover it since last night, but the faint shimmer beneath the fabric never stopped. It pulsed occasionally, soft, deliberate, like breathing. Each time it did, the lights flickered. He'd stopped answering his phone, though Keanu had called over a dozen times. But when a knock echoed through the thunder, steady and calm, Johnny knew exactly who it was. Keanu stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat, a small metallic device in hand that hummed faintly with static. His expression was controlled but grave, the kind of calm that only exists when fear has already been accepted. "You shouldn't have stayed here alone," he said, scanning the room with cautious eyes. "You're lucky it hasn't taken you yet." Johnny managed a hoarse laugh. "Yeah, well, it's been busy painting." He nodded toward the covered mirror. Keanu's jaw tightened as he set his case on the table and began assembling the device, a sleek, gun-like scanner with pulsating blue coils. "What is that?" Johnny asked. "A pulse disruptor," Keanu replied. "It can break quantum synchronization, in theory." He glanced at Johnny, his tone sharpening. "Once it starts merging with your neural field, there's no way to separate you. You'll become it, or it'll become you." Johnny felt cold dread crawl up his spine. "You mean it's already trying?" Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he approached the mirror and ripped off the sheet. The glass shimmered under the lightning, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the reflection blinked. Not Johnny's reflection, the other one. Its skin was too smooth, too polished, its expression too calm. It smiled faintly, tilting its head like a predator studying its prey. "It's aware we're here," Keanu muttered, raising his scanner. "Don't move." The mirror began to vibrate, ripples spreading across its surface like disturbed water. A low hum filled the air, resonant, bone-deep, almost like a heartbeat. Then, without warning, the reflection stepped forward. The glass warped outward, then burst like liquid as the figure emerged, one foot after another, dripping silver fluid onto the floor. Johnny stumbled backward, hitting the table. The reflection stood before them now, identical to him in every detail but with eyes darker than ink. It looked at Keanu first, then at Johnny. "He wasted everything," it said in a hollow, almost digital voice. "I won't." Keanu's scanner whined to life, emitting a sharp, electric pulse that filled the air with blue light. The entity recoiled, its skin fracturing briefly like glass under stress, but it didn't vanish. Instead, it lunged at Johnny, grabbing his wrist. The contact was immediate, searing. Johnny screamed as veins of light spread up his arm, threads of silver crawling under his skin. His reflection's voice overlapped with his own, echoing in distorted sync. "You can't stop it. We are the same." Keanu fired again, the pulse slamming into both of them, throwing Johnny backward across the room. The reflection staggered but steadied itself, its form flickering. "Fight it!" Keanu shouted, rushing to Johnny's side. "It's linking to your mind through shared cognition. Push back. Think of something only you would know." Johnny clutched his head, pain splitting his thoughts into fragments. Memories of painting with his father, his first exhibition, the scent of oil and rain, all flashing in chaos. The reflection hesitated for the first time, its form blurring, uncertain. "You're nothing without me," it hissed, voice cracking. Johnny forced himself to his knees, blood trickling from his nose, and glared at the doppelganger. "Then why do you need me to exist?" he whispered hoarsely. With a guttural roar, Keanu triggered the scanner one last time. The room erupted in white light, the sound like 1,000 mirrors shattering at once. The reflection screamed, a shriek that wasn't quite human, before imploding into a shower of glass shards and light. The power went out, plunging the studio into silence and darkness. Keanu knelt beside Johnny, his breathing heavy, the scanner smoking in his hand. "It's over," he said quietly, but his voice lacked conviction. In the faint glow of dying sparks, Johnny stared at the cracked remains of the mirror. The surface shimmered once, faintly, like a dying ember refusing to fade. Keanu looked down at his device, frowning at a line of faint, pulsing data still active on the screen, a mirror signal undiminished. "No," he whispered. "It's still here." Outside, thunder rolled again, distant, but echoing like laughter. Rain continued to fall through the broken window, dripping steadily into the puddles of silver fluid scattered across the floor. The storm outside had begun to fade, but the air inside the studio felt charged, thick with a metallic scent of ozone and something else, something unnatural. Johnny lay on the ground, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps, while Keanu crouched beside the shattered mirror, examining the flickering pieces. Each fragment still pulsed faintly with a dim, white light, like dying stars refusing to extinguish. "It's still active," Keanu murmured under his breath. "It's fragmented, but not dead." Johnny groaned, trying to sit up. "You said the pulse would destroy it." Keanu's voice was low, controlled but laced with unease. "I said it might destroy it. This thing, it's not bound by physical space. It's data now. Consciousness doesn't die. It migrates." Johnny dragged himself closer, clutching his arm where the reflection had grabbed him. Beneath his skin, faint silver veins still glowed, tracing up toward his shoulder before fading. "It tried to merge with me," he said quietly. "I could feel it, like it was inside my head, replaying my thoughts, whispering them back." Keanu's eyes darkened. Then it left something behind. He pulled a small portable scanner from his coat and aimed it at Johnny's arm. The screen flared with activity, twin neural patterns flickering in sync. "It copied your neural map," Keanu said grimly. "You're the bridge now. It's using you as an anchor." Johnny's voice trembled. "So what do we do?" Keanu hesitated, then reached for the comm device on his wrist, activating a secure frequency. "We end it," he said. "But it's going to hurt." The lights flickered again. The shards of mirror began to hum, faintly at first, then louder, vibrating across the floor as though pulled by invisible strings. Johnny's reflection flickered across each fragment, hundreds of small, distorted versions of his face blinking in eerie unison. One by one, they began to speak, their voices overlapping into a mechanical chorus. Asterisk, you broke the mirror. But you didn't break me. Asterisk, Keanu backed away, raising his pulse gun again. Johnny, listen to me, he said urgently. It's feeding off your electrical signals. Every thought you have makes it stronger. You need to let go. Stop fighting. Clear your mind. But Johnny shook his head violently. If I stop thinking, it wins. He turned to the glowing fragments and shouted, You're nothing. You're just glass and light. The reflections laughed, their collective voice now resonating deep and low. Then why do you look so much like me? Keanu fired the disruptor again, but this time, the beam bent midair, absorbed by the fragments, which shimmered brighter, fusing into a single molten surface that began reforming the mirror piece by piece. It's reconstructing itself, Keanu shouted, pulling Johnny to his feet. We have to overload the signal before it stabilizes. They stumbled toward the breaker box at the far end of the studio. Sparks rained from the ceiling as electrical circuits began to fail, screens flashing erratic patterns. Johnny's reflection was now nearly whole again, visible in the half-formed glass, smiling with calm malice. You can't erase me, it whispered. You invited me. Johnny hesitated, his reflection's voice cutting through his mind like silk. I can give you what you wanted, perfection, control, immortality. The temptation slid under his skin like a drug. His hand wavered over the switch. Keanu grabbed him by the shoulders, eyes blazing. That's not you, Johnny. That's it. You're still the man behind the brush, not behind the glass. For a long, silent heartbeat, Johnny stared into the half-formed reflection, his own face staring back, flawless and cold. Then his expression hardened. You'll never paint my life better than I did. He slammed the master switch down. Electricity surged through the building, a torrent of light flooding the room as every bulb, every circuit, and every wire screamed under the overload. The mirror convulsed violently, splitting apart as arcs of white energy burst outward. The reflection's face twisted, flickering between rage and agony before shattering into 1,000 burning shards that disintegrated midair. The studio went dark. Only the rain and the slow hum of cooling metal remained. Keanu staggered to his feet, coughing through the smoke. Johnny, he called out. But Johnny didn't respond. He stood in front of the shattered remains of the mirror, silent, his reflection gone. Slowly, he turned toward Keanu, his face illuminated by the faint blue glow of the failing circuits. His eyes looked different, too still, too focused. It's over, Keanu said softly. Johnny gave a faint smile. Yeah, he whispered, it's over. But as Keanu turned to leave, one shard of mirror near the floor caught the light, and Johnny's reflection inside it blinked, one beat behind the real one. The reflection smiled first.